In this tutorial, we're going to revisit table attributes. We've worked with them a little bit in the quick start tutorials, but we're going to go into a little bit more depth here. We're not going to show everything that we need to show. There will be later tutorials with more functionality, specifically on certain types of data attributes that are sort of more advanced. But for now, we're just going to go through everything you need to know about basic table attributes. So as you probably know by now, to get to the tables, you go into the data module in the lab here, and then to tables, and then you get to see the tables in our system. We're going to go into the customer table that we've been working with up until now, and we're going to go into this attributes section here to see a list of all the attributes that are currently in the system for the customer table. Now, very important point is there are actually some attributes that are associated with every table that you don't actually have to create yourself. When you create any table in the KZN8 platform, there are three attributes that we add automatically. The first one we call KZ deleted, which is KZ underscore deleted. And that is just a Boolean attribute that tells the system whether a record has been removed or not. As you probably remember from the Quick Start tutorial, you can very quickly remove and reinstate items by setting, and that effectively sets this KZ underscore deleted attribute to true or false to tell whether things have been deleted or not. So there's no need for you to add any attributes to your tables to specify whether items in that table are active or deleted. That's all handled by the system automatically. The other thing that we do in the KZN8 platform is we actually keep track of when items are created. So we have a KZ underscore created, and we even have a KZ underscore created user. So we know which user created each item in a table and the date and time that they did so. And we also have a KZ updated, which will be KZ underscore updated, and a KZ underscore updated user, so that we can track not only when an item in a table was last updated, but also who last updated an item. So let's just flick back to the tutorial here, and let's just look at the customer list that we have, all our customers here. We've got all this information on our customers, but we can actually add these special created and updated flags to this table here to actually see who created all these customers and who was the last person to update them. Now, as you know, if I click on one of these customers, I go to the customer details screen. So let's actually add them to this details screen. Let's add them under the description here. I want to know who created this customer and who updated it. To do that, we go back to the lab, we go back to the user interface and to the widgets, just like we were doing in the quick start tutorial. We'll find the customer details widget. We'll go down to the content, and we'll go down and into this display attribute designer. And obviously we want to put them in on column 3 here. And you'll see that if you look down here, I've got KZ underscore created and KZ underscore updated. All these other attributes in this list are the ones that we've actually added to this table ourselves. But anything that starts with KZ is kind of a system-based thing. So let's just put that KZ created in there and stick that up a bit to make it go underneath the description. And we'll do the same with KZ updated. And we'll put that in just a couple up there, so that goes underneath the created. So now we have description, created, and updated. Now if we go back to our application and refresh this screen, you can see that it tells me when this person was created and when it was last updated. And if I actually update this person now, and perhaps click that, you'll see that that's actually gone with today's date and time. It's showing me as the KZNator, this is the user. Obviously I'm signed in as a KZNator. So I'm kind of not really a user of this application, I'm a designer, but it still identifies that it's me that's done it. But if it was a normal user of the application, it would just show the name of that user there, not the word KZNator in the brackets. So that's kind of created and updated. And as I said, if you remember, we've got this remove button here, so we can remove this customer here, and if we remove it, it knows that it's removed, and if I go back to my list, it's disappeared and it's removed in here, and I can then go back into it and I can reinstate it. So all of that removed and reinstate is really done automatically using this other attribute we mentioned called KZ underscore deleted. So all of this functionality, the removed and reinstate functionality, is tied to that KZ underscore deleted attribute that is automatically added to every single item in every single table in KZN8, so you can always add and You can always remove and reinstate anything in any table without having to do anything else, not create your own attributes or anything. Those of you that have noticed will notice that even when I remove and reinstate the thing, that actually also updates the last updated date as well, because just removing and reinstating is actually just updating the KZ deleted, so it still constitutes an update. One final point on created and updated is when I first create an item in a table, then it just sets the created and the updated, last updated, to exactly the same value. So that when you first create something, the last updated and the created are the same value, and then when you update that item, it obviously leaves the created date alone and never touches that again, but the last updated date gets updated each time you then update an item in a table. So that's it for the sort of inbuilt attributes. Let's go back to the lab now and look at the actual attributes that we add ourselves. So if we go back to tables, and we go back to the customer table and back into attributes. So this list here then shows us, in this case, the 9 attributes we've added to this table ourselves. You can see in the list we've got the attribute name, the type, the identifier, the label, the placeholder, and so on and so forth. Now the important things are, of course, we can call these attributes whatever we want. The system actually uses this identifier behind the scenes, but obviously that's unreadable, so we obviously like to have a name that we actually understand what it means. But the very important point is even the name, as I said, these attributes that we've built into KZNet itself all start with KZ. So if I try to, for example, update the name of this source to be KZ source, it'll actually strip the KZ out. It won't let me do that. It'll actually take the KZ out. So you cannot create attributes that start with KZ. They are kind of implied. And you'll find that across KZNet. You can't name things with the letters KZ, whatever you want. You have to leave KZ that's the prefix is used internally by the KZNet platform. So now let's go through and talk about some of the sort of standard things you can set for all attributes, and then we're going to look at each attribute type in turn and go through the individual settings that we have for those. Probably the best place to start is with our customer name attribute, as that is a text attribute. So that's kind of a very simple one to work with. So if we open that one up, we can see that we've got the attribute type is text, the label is name, and the placeholder is enter customer name. And if I go back to the actual application and we go back to customers and we go to all customers and we go add customer, you'll see that name there, that label there corresponds to the label we've put here. The placeholder enter customer name is obviously goes in this box here as enter customer name, and the tooltip here, enter a name for this customer, is what appears when we click this little I box here, up it pops there. So we can kind of provide the user with a lot of information about what needs to go, you know, what needs to be, you know, filled in here with a combination of the label, the placeholder, and the tooltip. And you will find for pretty much all attribute types, you can enter the label, the placeholder, and the tooltip. Some things don't have placeholders, like Boolean values don't have placeholders, but most things will have labels, placeholders, and tooltips. The next section over here is this behavior section. This is very important. As you saw in our tutorial here, in the application, sorry, that this name is a required field, and that's because this has been set to required is true. Okay, if we update this and actually turn the required off, then when we click submit on that, it'll probably, and we refresh this, what finds out now this box is now green. So in KZNet, as I say, anything that's required or doesn't pass validation is shown up as red, and anything that's either optional or does pass validation is shown in green. You probably notice in sort of many web applications that you have to fill in a form, and then when you submit the form, that's when it decides to tell you what you need to fill in or not. In KZNet, we kind of don't agree with that approach. We think people should know straight up front what they should fill in. So by setting these values required and all the parameters on an attribute up front, we can actually build the form and very clearly show the user what needs to be completed and what doesn't need to be completed. And we've certainly found from user feedback that that's something that people find really useful. So let's go back to the lab here and have a look at the other settings. So we have here also is unique. So actually, we do actually want to use that because let's just say we don't actually want 2 customers with the same name. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to update that and say is unique is set to true. And you say something like a customer with that name already exists. Can't type, there we go. And if I submit that now, what we will find is, first of all, we'll need to synchronize this table again. So let's just go back and synchronize this table and go back there and then synchronize the table as always, because we've made changes that need synchronizing. And just leave that, that's sort of come up pretty quickly. If I now refresh that, that's now done. Then if I go back to my tutorial and refresh this screen here and add a customer now, let's just try putting in a customer 1 again. What we should get is a customer with that name already exists. It won't let us do it. But if I put in customer 11, it's absolutely fine with that. But again, if I try and change customer 2 now and update that to customer 11, it will also moan at me and tell me that I can't do that. But I'm very happy, it'll very happily let me create customer 22, but not customer 11. So now, as I say, just by setting that little simple option there on that attribute, if I go back to the name attribute, just by setting the is unique is true, a customer with that name already exists, and so on and so forth. By setting all of that, you've already done everything you need to do. That's all you need to do to make it ensure that they'll never have 2 customers with the same name. Notice also that the is required and filter and everything else has disappeared. When something is unique, there's always going to be a filter. It's already always a filtered attribute, so it doesn't need to be, you don't need to set the is filter equals true. That's why that's not available. And also, if something is unique, then it's also required. So you'll find in here, if I go back to my customer list here and add a customer, you'll see that it's a red field. Although I haven't actually set it as a required field, because I've set it as a unique field, it is by default therefore already set as a required field as well. Now, we want to just look at some of the other behavior attributes. Now that we've left that one as unique, it's hidden everything else. So let's just go back to a different type of attribute. Let's just go to this one here, review date. And you can see that we've talked about is unique, we've talked about is required. Is filter is really just means that that field is indexed. So if you want to use this field to sort the table or as a search attribute or in any other sort of thing that requires a filter, then you want to set the is filter equals true. And that way the system will create an index of it. Anything you're going to search for or sort by needs to be filtered, otherwise you're going to have performance issues. There's no real overhead to having lots of filters. I wouldn't filter everything, but you probably want to have quite a few filters. A lot of attributes will need to be filtered to make your application nice and responsive. And then the default value here, I'm actually going to go to the Boolean attribute, which I think is called is priority, if I can find it on page 2 here. Is priority. So the Boolean attribute is a good one. We always want to basically put a default value against a Boolean attribute. So basically what I've done here is I've set the default value to 0. So every time I create a customer, it's going to set the is priority, which is a Boolean attribute, on this customer to 0, which is effectively false. I could actually put in the word false here like this. That would be fine. Or I could set true like that. Or instead of true, I could put 1. But in our case, we want to set every single customer when it's first created as an is priority equals false, so we just leave that as 0. It says no change to be made, so I can cancel out of that. So yeah, default value is just a default value to add to that attribute every time you create a new item in that table. If we flick over to the application and we do actually add a new customer, let's just call it customer 44 and submit that, you'll see that when I find customer 44, the priority customer is set to X, which is false, which is what we've set it as. If we just go back to the lab and update this and change this to 1 and then submit that, we probably need to resync the table because it needs to do some work on that. So let's just resync the table and give that a few minutes. And yep, that's already completed. And if we go back to our application and create a new customer and call this one customer 55 as an example. Now this one should have default value set to, let's go to page 2, and now it's set to true because we set the default value to true. I'm going to put it back to false because I kind of want to leave it as false, but that's kind of just shows you how the default values work. So let's go back to the attributes, back into is priority, update that, set that to 0 again, and then just do submit there, and now that's going to be fine. I'll probably have to just sync the table. I might as well do that before we move on, and then we sync the table and give that a few moments. That'll come up, and that's already done. And then if we go back into attributes, we can carry on looking at other settings on these attributes. Before we do that, let's just talk quickly about what happens if you've got a table with data already in it and you start setting these properties and changing the structure of the table. Basically, if you you can obviously add new attributes to a table anytime you want, and if you add a new attribute, it'll just bolt those attributes into the tables that are already there. So if you have default values on attributes that are new attributes, it'll effectively just add that attribute to every item in the table with that new default value. If you turn on or off the is filter, that's just going to change the filtering of the table. That's not really going to make much difference to anything. And if you turn off the is required or turn on the is required, nothing's actually going to happen. It's just that in your user interface, you know, boxes that were red will suddenly start going green, and boxes that were green will suddenly start going red. Perhaps the most important one to understand is what happens with the is unique if you've got data already in your table. So let's just run through a little example. Let's go back to our customer table, make the name not unique, then make sure we have some duplicate names in the table, and then try and turn that table into a unique, turn that attribute back into a unique attribute and see what happens. So if we come out of here and we go back into our name attribute, and we're just going to turn this off here and just click that and say done. We're now going to have to synchronize the table. And now we're going to synchronize the table so that we've now got our customer table is being synchronized. Let's see if that takes a little time. There you go, that's already come up. Now if we go to our tutorial and look at our customers, let's just change. It's now going to let us, because it's not unique, we can now change this customer one. So we've now got effectively 2 customer ones in our table. Now if we try and make this attribute, the name attribute, unique, we really want to see what happens. So let's go back to our attributes in the customer table. Let's go to the name attribute. I'm just going to close these 2 messages here, and now you'll notice if I try and set this as unique and I click submit here, it moans at me and says I can't do that. So there's actually a check that goes on to make sure you can't create a unique attribute from an attribute that already exists if it does not have unique values. So if we go back to our tutorial here and go back into here and update this one again to customer 11, so that now they are all unique, and we go back in here, just cancel that and try that again, back in here, and now if we submit that, it says no problems at all. That can be done. We probably still need to synchronize the table as it needs to build all the indexes, the unique indexes. It's going to do that now, but now we're back to where we were. So you see, you can update table structure as much, you know, and the system will kind of intelligently deal with those issues quite easily. Obviously, there are going to be situations where you can get yourself in a real mess, so just sort of think through your changes. Don't sort of go crazy making changes. You will, you know, they will have impact, so just be sensible and just plan your changes sensibly and you'll be fine. So now let's just go back in and let's just look at a couple of the other things that we can do with attributes. Go back into this name attributes. So we've actually got this permission section here. We had a tutorial about permission basics, and we explained to you how we can set permissions on tables and how we can set permissions on individual attributes on tables. I think we kind of showed you during that tutorial how to do that, but that's just a reminder here. You know, you set the permission for this attribute on this table in here, and that will restrict who can actually update the name of a customer. That's kind of it for this kind of widget here, but down here we've got this alert widget. So what are alerts? Let's just put an alert in here and go, this is an alert. So this is kind of another area where you can put in information that appears in the user interface. So we're just going to pick a star. Let's just pick star, danger, and there it goes. There's the alert here. This is alert, star, danger. And now what happens is if I go back to my tutorial and I do refresh, whenever I have a form with the name, then that alert will appear below the label, but above the box for the name. So it's kind of a way of adding it. It's sort of an extension to the tooltip. It's another thing you can show. The tooltip, you actually have to click this thing to show, but this is a message that shows right there in your face, right there above the control for entering that item. If I go back in here, as I said, you can kind of put, you can have these different styles. There's danger, which is red, info is blue, green is success, and warning is orange. So let's just change that to warning. And I can also add multiple messages here. Let's just put another message here. And then we'll just make that one info. So it's just another, and we'll just change the sort order, put that one below the other one. And now if we go into our tutorial now and refresh, and again update that, this is an alert, and then they come up in that order. So whatever order you put them in, that's what the order they come up in. So it's just a way of adding additional information to individual attributes on a table. You will find that this alert section is actually used throughout, so you can shove these kind of alerts in widgets, in layouts, but here we're actually shoving them actually in the input forms that we create in our widgets. So that's really it for the sort of basic settings that you have on every attribute. The other bit down here, this parameter section, this is very specific on each type of attribute. So we're just going to race through the really common attribute types and just show you what all those mean and how they work. So starting with the text attribute, this name, we could actually go in here, we could put a minimum length in. Let's put a 5 in there, and let's just put a 20 in there for fun. And this will remove the spaces, and we'll come on to this in a minute. We want to remove, let's say we want to remove special characters. We go yes. Let's just remove the spaces as well. Allow special characters. Let's just say we want to remove all special characters, but we want to keep the hyphen. We want to capitalize the first letter only. We could either force the names to lowercase, uppercase, capitalize the start of each word, capitalize the first letter only, or then send everything to lowercase. So there are various options of formatting. Let's just pick all uppercase, and we'll come back to this one in a little while. So I've kind of changed that, and we can see now in the UI exactly how that works. So let's flick back to our application and just cancel that, and let's try and refresh the screen and update the customer here. Now, if I go in here, you'll see that until I enter 5 characters or more, I get a message because we said the minimum length was 5. Now I'm okay, but if I keep going, it won't type any more than that. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, let's say I start putting in all sorts of garbage in here, dash dash 35, blah, blah, blah. Yes. And we've got uppercase. Let's put some uppercase and lowercase. So because we had we better put some spaces in as well, hadn't we? Just to make it really, let's just do that. We put some spaces in. So we want to remove the spaces, remove the character, and it'll allow that, and it's all uppercase. So if I click on this, this is going to kind of clear everything out, turn everything uppercase. Let's see what it happens. And you'll see that it's just done exactly that. It's turned it to uppercase, removed all the special characters except for the hyphens, because we allowed hyphens. And you can kind of see that all these settings have all kind of contributed to that result. So you can, it doesn't matter what the people enter, you can kind of use these parameters in the text field to a text attribute to really kind of control what you want people to do. I've just gone back and cleaned that up, and I've gone back to the application and just rename that customer as something more sensible, and then we can look at the some of the other parameters. If we go back to the lab, we look at the input mask. Now that's kind of used for kind of phone numbers and stuff. So if we actually add a new attribute to this table and call it phone number, we can actually use the input mask to control the format of that phone number. So let's go back, let's add another attribute to this table. Let's call it phone. Again, it will be of type text. And we'll put in here phone number. Okay, and then we will click submit. On that attribute there, as I say, we will use this input mask. We'll leave everything else as it was, but we'll just do something like this. We'll do bracket 99, bracket space 99999999, and just do that and submit that like that. Now, if we go into our user interface and we go to our widget, customer details widget, let's just add that phone number in so that we can, 1, see it, and 2, update it. So let's just add it in here as a phone number. Let's just put it in at the bottom at like 8,000 just to make sure it goes at the bottom there. And then we'll also do the same in here. We'll put it in here as phone number, and we'll put that as 8,000 down there. And again, we'll just do that. And that should be everything we need to do to actually add that phone number to our application. So now if we go back to our application and in the customer details, refresh that, we can see we've got the phone number here. And if we do an update here and we click in here, you can see it's kind of put, as I say, this input mask in place. So I can put 45, and it's filling in based on the structure of the number that I provided. So if I now submit that, it comes up there like that, and it also presents it in the same format that we've set in the input mask. Just as a little aside, if you're using your application on a mobile phone, it'd be nice if that phone number, you could click on it and actually ring that number for you. You can actually do that if I go back to my display value section in here and I go into edit here, I can actually select the format override and put phone link there. Now when I submit that and I refresh the screen, it doesn't work because I'm on a desktop, but if I click on that, that's now actually a phone link. And if I click on that, it will actually, it's trying to actually make a phone call, but on your mobile phone, that'll take you straight to the phone part of the phone. So no need to copy and paste the phone number from your Casenode application into your phone. You just go straight onto that link, click on the link, and just dial away. Now, if we go back to our lab and we look at our attributes again on our parameters, on our text attributes. So let's go back to our attributes and go back to perhaps the name attribute we were looking at. There's one other one, which is image. Now, this is a very advanced feature, and we're actually going to do an entire tutorial on this. But basically, we can hold an entire image inside a text attribute. So, for example, we could actually have an attribute on our customer table called something like customer image or customer profile, and we could actually put a picture of our customer into this table. And this is how we would do that. But I'm going to show that in a completely separate tutorial because it's a much more advanced feature. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go and look at some of the other basic attributes. So let's go back to our list of attributes and let's have a look down here. So on a Boolean, we have no parameters on a Boolean. There's nothing you need to do. As I said earlier, you're really just going to set the default value on a Boolean attribute. So there's no parameters on a Boolean attribute. But if we go down to our other types of attributes, what have we got? Lookups, again, we're not going to look at those in this one. We're going to look at them later. But if we look at date times, you will see that I've got a minimum value, a maximum value, a default date time, and a minute step value. If I actually open this up and click update, you can see that you just pick a minimum date value, a date and time value, a maximum date and time value to specify the max and the min, which is pretty obvious. This default time, however, if I go back to here and show you again what I have in here, it defaults to 12 o'clock. But if I wanted to, I could default this to say 1800 like that. So it'd be 24-hour clock. So I'm going to click submit on that one. Now, if I go back to here and refresh this screen and update this, you'll see that the default is now 1800 as I specified. And then you'll see that I can go like this and I can pick an hour, but then I can actually choose any number of minutes. But let's actually say, no, you can only do 5-minute intervals. So let's just again come out of here. And if I go minute step value and change this to 5, now if I submit this and then refresh this page again, now when it comes to entering a date, you'll find that yes, I can do that, but now it kind of steps in 5-minute intervals. I can't actually do 1 minute, it does 5 minutes. If we play around with the minimum value and maximum value, we could set this, for example, to the 1st of September and perhaps the end of September. So this is basically saying you can only pick a date time value within September. I mean, don't know why you'd want to do that, but you might want to. So if I submit that like that, and I now run this application again and refresh it, now if I pick a time in September, all good. But if I try and pick a time in, say, August, I'm going to get this nasty message. This is basically telling you the UTC number, and it's coming up in red a little bit to say that it doesn't like it, so it's pretty obvious that you can't do that. And if I was to go pick a number in September, it'd be fine. And if I picked a number in October, again, it would shout at me and say you can have a maximum value of that. So, you know, you can set those values. We probably look at fixing up this message a bit to make it look a bit prettier, but you get the idea that actually it kind of works. You can set the minimum value, the maximum value, the default time and the time element, and the step value. So there's kind of parameters you can set to control how the user would enter those date times. I've just reset all those values back to the defaults of nothing for the last contacted attribute. But now we're going to look at the date attribute. And a bit like date time, it's really very simple. If we go to the review date, you've just got a minimum value and a maximum value, and you just set those minimum maximum values in here, and that'll come through to the UI when people are trying to enter review dates. So there's no real need to go into that in any more detail. If we then go to integers, so where's the integer? Was rating. So let's try and go find the rating attribute. Here it is. So again, this has basically got 0, 5, and 1. So this is basically saying the minimum is 0, the maximum is 5, and the step value is 1. And if we go back to our application, you remember that we use that, and this is why we've got 5 stars, and it clicks up by 1 star each time. So that's kind of how that works. If we went back to the Kaizen lab and changed this to, say, 10, and submitted that, then what would happen is, if we refresh this, all of a sudden we'd have 10 stars instead of 5 stars. So that's kind of how the integer values can be maintained in there. And similarly with decimal values, in our application, we're actually using this slider which has got 0 to 1 with a step of 0.1. So again, if we go back to our decimal attribute, which was discount here, you'll see that's exactly what we've got. Minimum value is 0, maximum value of 1, indicating 100%, and the step value of 0.1, which then determines how this slider then works. So that's really it for all the basic attributes and all their basic parameters. And I think in the next tutorial we're going to go on to something else, but that's pretty much everything you need to know about the basic attributes. As I said, there are some attributes we haven't looked up, mainly lookups and links, because we will do specific tutorials just on those. They're a lot more advanced. And there's another attribute type called hierarchy, which is a very advanced attribute type, so there will be a whole in-depth tutorial on that later. So in terms of the basics, you've now got everything you need on attributes, and I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial.